Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is the Hour of the Raven, your channel for everything Ravenloft, RPG, Dungeons and Dragons, and horror. Today, we unravel the secrets of the assembly and animation of the created, artificial beings built by the hands of men who dared to challenge the laws of life and death. Although golems are classic creatures in Dungeons and Dragons, in the Ravenloft setting, these creatures receive a completely different treatment from that presented in the monster manual. Far from being simple magical guardians created to obey orders, the created are presented as one of the greatest tragedies in all of the Land of the Mists. They represent the horror of human arrogance, obsession, and the inability to assume responsibility for their own creations. The primary source for these creatures is the Van Richten Guide to the Created, one of the tomes written by the legendary monster hunter Rudolf van Richten. This sourcebook does not seek only to catalog an enemy or point out its weaknesses. It attempts to understand one of the greatest mysteries of Ravenloft: how a man can create life, and what are the terrible consequences of such act. The present video will not be dedicated to game mechanics. Just as in our previous episodes, we will draw our inspiration mainly from the old Ravenloft supplements published for AD&D's 2nd edition, using them as the basis to understand the nature of these creatures. If you play the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, you will notice that many of these ideas do not appear explicitly in the current books, but they can certainly serve as inspiration to create much more complex and memorable antagonists for your campaign. In this first episode, we will address the origins of the myth of the Golems, and we will understand how the created are assembled and animated. Are you ready? We woke up in a cold laboratory. Pain and confusion welcome us with open arms. The cold eyes of Mordenheim look at us with detachment. He tells us that the confusion and lack of memories should last a few days or weeks. Perhaps, with time, we may even recover our identity. He then leaves us in the care of a deformed assistant, saying that he has other obligations, and telling him to take care of our readaptation and re-education. A feeling of frustration, despair, and rage overwhelm us, but all that we can utter is an unintelligible groan of suffering. Only brief glimpses pass through our minds. The gaze of a huge lupine beast hunting. Blood on our hands. The face of the scientist, studying us while we lose consciousness, a goblet fallen on the floor. The horror of our existence is unbearable. Our new bodies are clumsy and disproportionate. After a few days, we become more capable of moving in these unquared forms, and some memories and knowledge return to our minds. Some of us remember how to read, and lock it away in the manor. We search for anything that can help us understand our fate. What is not lacking in Mordenheim's library are treatises on constructs and flesh golems. The horror of our creation is then unveiled before our eyes. Hour of the Raven. In practically every culture of humanity, we'd find stories about men who tried to create life, imitating or surpassing the acts of the creator deity. Long before the birth of modern science, priests, alchemists, philosophers, and mystics already wondered whether it would be possible to reproduce the greatest of miracles, the creation of life. Among the best known traditions of this myth is the ancient Jewish folklore. men of great wisdom and profound knowledge of the divine mysteries, could shape human figures from clay, and through the combination of sacred words, mystical symbols, and secret rituals, awake within them a limited spark of existence to create a golem. The golems of the ancient legends were rarely presented as monsters. In most stories, they appear as servants or protectors, created to defend persecuted communities or perform tasks that require superhuman strength. They were obedient, silent creatures, devoid of true free will. But there was always a tone of warning present in these stories. No matter how great the knowledge of their creator, no artificial creature remained forever under control, and many times the creature could turn against its creator. This ancient warning crossed the centuries and found a new form at the beginning of the 19th century. In 1818, Mary Shelley published what many consider to be the first great modern science fiction novel, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. A scientist obsessed with creating life reanimates a body built from numerous corpses through scientific experiments. Much more than a story about reanimated corpses, Shelley's novel discusses responsibility, guilt, isolation, and the consequences of excessive ambition. The horror never resides only in the reanimation of the creature, but in the inability of its creator to understand that which he has brought into the world, and the consequences of his ambition, responsibility, and the revenge born from the rejection of his creation. The dread golems of Ravenloft, also called constructs or decreated, as they are named by Rudolf von Richten in his studies, deepen the reflections proposed by Mary Shelley to give these monsters a unique aspect. The created of the land of the mists are an example of the price of the ambition, obsession, and madness of their creators, and of the tragedy they unleash through their acts. Many adventurers use the term golem to refer to any artificial creature, but the studies of Rudolf von Richten make an important distinction. Although accounts from distant lands reveal the existence of constructs created through the power of fate of arcane forces, as obedient servants and guardians, perfect instruments of their creators, the hidden powers that permeate the land of the mists exert a corrupting force upon these creatures that gain life through the obsession of their creators. Not only wizards and clerics can use their mystical and arcane gifts to animate constructs. In this land of horrors, the madness and obsession of the creators become equally powerful tools for the animation and creation of constructs. The created are not merely tools. They are endowed with consciousness and with a psychic bond to their creators. Throughout his research, von Richten observes that practically all creators share three fundamental characteristics. First, all possess an artificial body carefully constructed by their creator. Second, all undergo some extraordinary process that awakens their consciousness and animate their bodies. Finally, all develop a surprisingly similar psychological pattern, regardless of the material used in their construction, which ultimately corrupts them. It is precisely this last observation that most intrigue scholars. Although they may be animated with some degree of innocence, this unhealthy bond ultimately afflicts these creatures with the madness, obsession, rejection, and frustration of their creators, and the pain of their existence corrupts them into evil monstrosities as time passes. To answer these questions, we must examine each of these stages of creation. Everything begins with the choice of the materials and the assembly of the body. Any type of material may be used to the creation of a construct, From creatures made of clay or simple straw scarecrows, to creatures built by skilled blacksmiths and sculptures from iron or stone, all may be animated by the obsession of their creators. Sinister accounts reveal the existence of golems made of glass, bones, intricate mechanical parts, or even wooden dolls. Without a shadow of a doubt, however, in the Land of the Mists, the most common type among the created are flesh golems, made through an amalgam of corpses. Perhaps it is the malleability of flesh, or the abundance and ease of obtaining the raw material, or even its resemblance to their own creators, that makes such constructs so prevalent. Although our studies encompass every type of construct, given the prevalence of this type of creature, the flesh golem will be the basic reference that we shall use in our studies. When we think about the creation of a golem, we normally imagine the moment in which the creature awakens after being animated, surrounded by scientific, alchemical, or mystical experiments. Its process of creation, however, begins much earlier in the very madness of its creators. Each created is, first, a work patiently built by human hands. When a body is created from wood, stone, clay, or metal, its creators, sculptors, or craftsmen spend resources, time, and energy in the obsessive search for materials. The process usually drives the obsessed creators to their limit, in search of the perfect material for a body that must contain the spark of life. The search frequently transforms brilliant men into individuals consumed by obsession, who care little about the high material costs, destroyed relationships, or ruined reputations in pursuit of a single objective. In the case of flesh golems, it is precisely during this period that many scholars cross moral boundaries from which they are never able to return. As the obsession grows, the creator ceases to see people and sees only sources of raw material. At first, most sick bodies obtained legally through unclaimed corpses, donation for anatomical studies, or the bodies of executed criminals. But they soon realized that such materials rarely satisfy their expectation. Cemeteries, hospitals, and battlefields become a great repository of raw material, and even murder may be seen as a viable means of obtaining the necessary material. The construction of flesh golems never involves fewer than 6 different corpses. Countless debates have already been held regarding the reasons for the necessity of multiple bodies without reaching an obvious conclusion. One would expect that a single, intact, and well-preserved body should be a more perfect vessel for animation, avoiding the laborious process of assembling a corpse. The theory most widely accepted among arcanists and scholars is that bodies, even if only in parts, while they have not yet decomposed, retain remnants of vital energy, and that 6 different bodies would possess the minimum amount of this spark of life required to ensure successful animation. This requirement for many bodies creates great challenges for the creators, who must not only stitch the body together, but also ensure that ligaments, muscles, and tendons are properly connected and functional in their creations. One curious detail is that the body parts used don't need to belong to the same species. Bodies from various humanoid races are frequently assembled in laboratories, and the only limit is the insane mind of their creators. Although rare, there are reports of creatures assembled with bestial or even monstrous body parts, or with anomalous anatomical forms, possessing multiple limbs. At this stage, the skill of their creator is severely tested, and knowledge of anatomy and surgery become essential. This is one of the reasons why most flesh golems are created from large specimens, making anatomical manipulation easier. The quality of the material used and the skill of their creators directly affect the strength and ability of the creatures. The preparations of the materials and the assembly of the constructs is a slow and laborious process which may require months or even years. Especially in the case of flesh golems, the decomposition and deterioration of tissues and organs are a major cause for concern. Temperature and humidity are determining factors, with cold or extreme dryness helping to preserve bodies. It is no coincidence that Lamordia is known for sheltering so many flesh golems, as the severe winters help to preserve the necessary raw material. In less favorable climates, creators of flesh golems must prepare body preservation chambers within their laboratories, or devote themselves to faster process of assembly and animation. No matter how meticulous the process of assembling the body may be, this phase is only the beginning of the process of creation. If the assembly of the body represents the triumph of anatomy, engineering, and the manual skill of its creator, animation represents its most mysterious moments. When the vessel of life has been constructed, the great challenge still remains, awakening the spark of life within the inanimate body. Is it possible for humanity to grant true life to an inanimate object? The obsession of many creators leads them to believe this theory, believing that a new life may be created through a great discharge of energy. There are also those who believe that life cannot be recreated, but instead must be redirected from another source, attracted and imprisoned. This distinction, seemingly subtle, completely changes our understanding of the created. If life can truly be created, then perhaps humanity has found a way to rival the gods themselves. But if it is merely drawn from some unknown place, perhaps no one has ever understood what truly awakened upon the experimentation table. Perhaps there is something hidden within the mists, always willing to answer whenever a man dares to call upon such power. For those who believe that life is not created, but transferred to the golem, there remains the question of where the spirit that occupies the body comes from. Some believe that the obsession of the creator attracts dark spirits, supernatural and inhuman entities that desire to possess a corporeal vessel, to exist in the material world. These beings are not to be confused with ghosts of mortal creatures, but rather with immortal and immortal entities whose corporeal existence is itself an aberration. Another theory maintains that the creation of construct may use the life force and spirit stolen from another creature. Numerous accounts reveal creators using evil experiments to drain the vital energy and spirit of other creatures to animate their created. Sacrifices or mystical, alchemical, or scientific process transfer the spirit of a living being into the construct, imprisoning it. Another method of transferring vital force used by creators of flesh golems is the transplantation of a living brain. The living brain is, in some way, still connected to the spirit of a patient. This type of operation and transfer is extremely complex and delicate, and only transfers the spirit into a new body if the brain is removed from a patient who is still alive. It is important to point out that a flesh golem could still be animated through a brain removed from a corpse, but in this case, the spirit inhabiting the created will come from some other unknown source. But merely attracting a spirit into the body of a construct is still not enough, and a powerful source of energy is required to bind that spirit to its new vessel. For centuries, alchemists, necromancers, natural philosophers, and arcanists have offered completely different answers to this question. Some seek the solution in the vital fluids. Others believe that the answer lies in great electrical discharges. There are those who defend purely magical process or mystical rituals, while others call upon dark powers to fulfill their desires. Regardless of the answers, all specialists agree that an extraordinary quantity of energy must be applied to the newly constructed body. Each creator of a construct uses a different method for the animation of their constructs, and there is no consensus regarding a single method, not even among creators of the same type of golem. The truth is that electricity, alchemy, or profane rituals are not the answer to the mystery of the animation, but merely different paths leading to a distinct phenomenon. Wizards and men of faith may use mystical and supernatural forces to animate constructs, bringing golems to life under their mystical control. This process requires great mental effort and strength of will from their masters, who must channel powerful arcane or divine energies through their conviction and faith. Even this process involves risks, for these magically controlled creatures may still turn against their creators. But how can ordinary people, with no knowledge whatsoever of the mystical arts, be capable of bringing one of the created to life? Some may claim to have developed a scientific method capable of overcoming this barrier, but at times, even simple peasants or ordinary people consumed by grief can animate a construct to the force of their obsession. The truth is that the principal source of energy capable of binding the spirit to the body of a golem and finally animating the created is the psychic energy of the creator. The obsession that leads creators to follow such an evil path may arise from many different sources. Pride, arrogance, pain, and despair often drive ordinary people into madness and obsession and accumulate a powerful psychic energy. The exhausting process of preparing and assembling the created drives its creator to the limits of exhaustion and destroys their sanity, culminating in a peak of psychic energy. The enormous quantity of psychic energy, combined with the process developed by the insane mind for the animation of the golem, overflows during the experiment final stage, binding the captured spirit to the constructed body and animating the creature. These psychic energies also bind, in an inseparable manner, the minds of the creature and the creator, forming an unbreakable and dangerous bond that ultimately affects directly the psychology of the created. In the depths of modern Heinz Castle, we are forgotten by our Creator and His servant. Though we do not encounter our Creator again, we can somehow sense His scorn for us, how we are relegated to the status of lesser creations, unwanted beings, and byproducts of other, more important projects. Glimpses of our past lives surface as confused memories, only deepening our despair and bewilderment. The only solace we find lies in books and treatises on constructs, which help us understand our own afflictions. Join us, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notifications. And in the next video, we will explore the mysteries of the mind and psychology of the created.